Dear viewers, welcome to today's series Visite. And at this point I would like to thank you again for all the valuable inquiries and letters, and for the nice, appreciative words, which of course always increase the joy of this show. It's like a synergy effect. And that, I believe, leads to a very creative exchange together. And I want to transition straight away to a first request that reached me from Norbert in Germany. And you wrote me that you are asking for an assessment of your wife's lab results. And I read this email. You write that she has low leukocyte counts. For those who may not be fully involved, leukocytes are the white blood cells, part of the blood picture formed in the bone marrow. And on the other hand, medicine observed that both uric acid levels as well as liver enzyme values are increased, so transaminases, or rather, GOT, GPT. And you write that your wife has been vegan for 4 years and that she still adds eggs, so animal protein in the form of eggs. She takes vitamin C and D every day. That's 4,000 units of vitamin D and oil in the form of linseed oil or omega-3 capsules. She doesn't smoke, she doesn't drink. She is 1.55 meters tall and weighs 48 kilograms. What could she do to raise the leukocyte levels and of course lower the others? When I read this mail, I thought, yes, that's how it is. So that's how we go about it medically. We do blood work, we look at liver values, we look at uric acid levels, we look at sugar and we look at cholesterol levels and we look at alternatives to bring these things back into balance. It is in large part related to having a guideline concept, what we doctors know, what should be done in this case, and thus of course have a very specific influence on these laboratory values. That's not it. And I don't have a universal recipe which I take out of my pocket and say you can use it to raise leukocytes. With this you can lower liver values, but what is now a very honest consequence would be to deal with to what extent this organism lacks a lot and to what extent this organism may have to tolerate a load on the other side that it can no longer cope with. That directs the gaze a little more into the broad, but above all deep. And at this point, of course, you have to connect with what the leukocytes or the defense in general has to do. It protects us every day from too much bacterial load, viral load, and sometimes maybe also parasitic load. These are things that always need replenishment, which always need a balance. At the moment that 70% of our organism consists of protein. And if you don't focus on the justification or condition for optimal protein supply, you will notice deficits. And the stress mustn't grow because with an additional load, that means providing more defense and more strength. And that is the first important message. Here we have to look further and deeper. Maybe behind a low white blood cell count stands lack of sufficient strength to produce enough leukocytes. The body always reserves the right to decide where to shift priorities. The other thing is that, of course, if there isn't enough replicating, you have to look. Maybe there is an increased stress on a level that we may not even notice symptomatically, but requires a constant leukocyte readiness. Here, of course, we have to measure inflammation values, for example the high sensitive CRP. This is a C-reactive protein, which is what the body activates whenever it's about a latent inflammation, and high sensitive because an inflammatory phenomenon in terms of a real symptom cannot be felt at all. It remains to be seen whether this leukocyte readiness also is degraded in the sense of a psychological stress situation. You do not give the signal of an optimal defense enough thought and attention when you are under high mental stress. We know today that stress in the sense of stress is not always associated with how a life situation changed on the outside. It can be a war of roses in a divorce, it can be losing your job, it can mean the death of a loved one, it can mean being overwhelmed professionally. No, quite often it is the stress that offers itself latently in ourselves. Please don't underestimate the fact that a child's trauma is a major psychological burden at one point in one's life and always causes a certain tension in the subconscious. I remember a patient who suffered from severe rheumatism. On the other hand, of course, also provided rheumatic parameters in the laboratory. But the cause was different. The reason was, in the 4th grade she had to write an essay and she failed this essay. And the teacher made her look like a fool. She had to read this essay in front of the class. That brought her into such great humiliation for her whole life, but also into insecurity. She has lost faith in herself. She was ridiculed and laughed at by the children. But then life also developed things in such a way that life got a strong partner in this weakness, but they never met as equals. I'm just saying between inflammation and stress and inflammation there is an absolute, great dependency in itself. And believing to force a leukocyte value with something will not succeed. Because that will then lead past the reason why it actually came to this depth. This is a value that I come across very often, but which also raises questions when I have high cholesterol. What has not been the same in the metabolic process for a long time? And that's why it's important to really check these things from the psychological side as well. Of course, at 1.55 m and 48 kilograms you don't have an ideal weight, your body has been using a certain reserve for quite a long time. And now, of course, it depends on how do I deal with my life. Do I continue to challenge it very strongly or do I now go to a level in the future, where I put more substance in there too? And I have a lot of experience with vegan nutrition, a lot with vegetarian nutrition, of course also reduced carbohydrates, low carb. What we actually want to focus on is that the body needs everything. And it needs a very, very good compensation in order to take good care of it in certain phases of life. And so I have to tell you honestly, my experience is that not all vegetarians and vegans are healthy. But a person who comes from the fullness of life and has enough processes to give it away, to get rid of it, is wonderfully prepared if they put many things in life aside and very consistently adapt to a diet that is significantly reduced, with carbohydrates and sometimes also proteins. Fasting is indicated there, but that is not the case here. Here you really have to pay a lot of attention to keeping a close eye on the build-up processes. One speaks of anabolic and catabolic metabolism. And if that goes in a direction that challenges it more than builds up, then sometimes these are things that we observe in the laboratory. But we can't force that through anything. And I don't want to either, because the entire immune system, that's our guardian angel battalion. It's so broad, it's millions or if not billions of processes that interlock. As you force one, you create an imbalance on the other. The body creates this balance all by itself. It just needs structure, order, must be able to fall back on its supply. And these are things that now have to be in the hands of a colleague who will assess it from a point of view that doesn't tell you how can I get rid of it in the laboratory. But with cholesterol you can see very clearly how quickly this happens. It goes, drug, cholesterol better, patient happy, doctor happy, unbelievable. And the side effects so very quietly in the back bring a metabolic process out of balance and no longer supply the cellular energy output. Q10 and a statin have the same approach within cellular metabolism. But back here, it is also understood that liver enzymes are naturally elevated. And whenever liver enzymes are elevated or the transaminases, then this means that the liver cell is no longer self-contained. Otherwise I wouldn't find the transaminases elevated in the blood. They all have huge tasks within the cell metabolism. And you know, because of the amount of information that we also give via this TV channel that deals with health, it's a health TV. Every hospital deals with illness. And any health television doesn't bother with illness, but tries to give things into hands that I can put back into my consciousness in order to find the way out of the illness. You will never hear the word healing here, because no doctor can heal, but that is what the body strives for 24 hours a day. It wants to go back to its original state and that span in between, that's what we doctors are trained to understand. Where did it lose its balance? And this is where the liver comes in, of course. These transaminases, which are incredibly important for metabolic processes, are found only in the blood, including uric acid, because the acid-base balance is no longer in balance. Uric acid is of course on the one side an end product from the protein metabolism. But what is the idea alone when protein is too strong, now not from the few organic eggs, but from your own depletion, through your own events, that an imbalance has arisen here. And the liver cell, which has to be closed again, also needs substance for this. That's why the big appeal here again, do not just exclusively supplement with vitamin D, and 4000 is not a high-dose therapy. We're talking about completely different units. That's the smallest dose, which of course, may be now at a good, optimized vitamin D value can sometimes be reduced. Because the sun is shining, because spring is here, summer is just around the corner. But you have to measure in October to know if you're going into the winter with 4,000 or maybe with 6,000 or 8,000 units. Vitamin C. Of course you can add vitamin C, but you can get vitamin C much better through the aronia berry or via sea buckthorn juice or via enough and sufficient fresh fruit and vegetables now that spring is just around the corner. This does not require an extra substitution on my part. You're taking omega-3, which is very nice. Even fish from a truly organic source, from a culture where you can be sure that the fish is certified. I think quality speaks the big language here. Of course, eating fish would be a more honest alternative. But omega-3 is also incredibly important. Please also pay attention to the health of your teeth at this moment. Pay attention to the stress in your body. Toxic. Check for viral reactivations. A chronically latent inflammatory process naturally also needs a huge defense that has to be ready every day. Check that the gut doesn't have leaky gut, just via the gut, solely on the possibility of also the absorption of the micronutrients, to ensure proteins, carbohydrates, fats. There are an incredible number of statements based on the stool sample, which will give you so much strength from a depth of construction tomorrow. The gut is the root of the human plant, which then shows very quietly, simply as part of the review, maybe after 3 or 2 months, that the system is slowly stabilizing. And protein in the sense of whether animal protein or vegetable protein, these are things that should actually be, I believe, more incorporated in your diet at the moment. There are very high-quality protein amino acids. The 8 essential amino acids are an absolute must every day. And this absolute must just means I can pulverize it in the form of putting powder, protein powder under my food at that moment or stir it into my soup or even water, then. I have no risk that my body is undersupplied. It can only be a bridge builder. You shouldn't be strictly vegan on the one hand and not look at things in a balanced way on the other. If you now turn to someone who, of course, tells you correctly in this regard that you need this amount substantially because of your body weight, then you are already on the safe side. Please also think of strength soups, healing soups, chicken broth from an organic chicken or a good cut of beef. I don't want to offend you as part of your vegan diet. But what I wish for is that you are strong, healthy, of normal weight, and have the strength to live and don't worry that these increased laboratory values might disturb you in any way. You can't do that cosmetically and you can't do that artistically either. And you shouldn't try to correct that symptomatically either, but now ask yourself questions and look for answers to these questions. And I hope that I was able to explain a few things to you at that moment and also for the other viewers in the future. A doctor who thinks holistically acts differently because they have learned to think differently. And they pick up signals. And I have to tell you, 80% is the conversation. And the conversation, which is actually already up to 80%, show, is there a need for a few more laboratory values or can experience and perhaps of course one or the other laboratory values confirm this. But we should not overestimate these things, but we should learn to understand them. I think we'll get pretty good depth then. I would like to end with a thought that I have. And I'm always asked, what is something particularly valuable, high quality? Or when do you speak of a healthy diet? And I think we should take the opportunity of a Visite broadcast to give you a few dietary rules. Short and sweet. And that's where I want to start today after this show with the first one. Healthy eating, what does that mean? And if you only think about that 17,000 foodstuffs come every year as a new creation of our food technologies in the huge supermarkets, then I have to tell you that what the food industry produces for us mainly comes from corn and soy. You would never otherwise put that in the fridge or in your kitchen. That has lost the right to a food. It is a dietary supplement. And so, my greatest message of all to you, who want to start giving life greater acceptance, meaning, respect. And this is our body. It wants to be taken care of by us. Everything else it does for you by itself. But if you don't do that for it, then tomorrow it won't be well. And the focus is on food. This means that everything that still has life in it, that has energy in it, is high-quality food. And I'll go a little further. If it can still remain high energy today, and that's why I say it consciously high energy, because it is not treated like the apple that is sprayed 10, 20 times, but the organic apple. And if it has a small damaged area in the organic department, I'll take it with me and cut it out. I still have the guarantee that life can somehow still continue. And take that as your first rule. And I was a very big supporter of the great Max Brucker back then, in my very young days as a doctor. And Max Brucker wrote such wonderful books. Who kept getting this message across. Don't buy anything advertised. And I always suspected that. And in dealing with things over the years, I have to say how much greatness is in that sentence alone. And you should really check yourself, is it worth it for now? Or is it actually something unloving towards me and my body? With this in mind, I wish you all wonderful days for the week ahead, and I look forward to the letters, which you can then send to Visite at QS24.tv. With this in mind, thank you for your attention today. And I'm really looking forward to next week and remain until then with warm regards. Goodbye.